The invitation sounded harmless, almost warm. My stepmom said she missed me, that it would be nice to catch up, and that dinner was on her. I didn't realize until much later that the table had already been set not for food, but for judgment. I almost canceled that morning. Something in my stomach felt off, the same quiet warning I'd learned to ignore growing up. But I told myself I was being dramatic. People change. Maybe this was her trying to make peace. It wasn't. My name is Amelia Brooks. I'm 27 years old. And this is the story of how a simple dinner invitation turned into the confrontation that finally made me see my place in my own family. If you enjoy real life stories like mine, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. My dad married my stepmom Karen when I was 16, old enough to understand tension, young enough to blame myself for it. She wasn't openly cruel. That would have been easier. Instead, she specialized in subtlety comments disguised as concern, criticism wrapped in smiles. Are you sure you want seconds? I just worry you're wasting your potential. I'm only saying this because I care. My dad always said she meant well. After I moved out at 20, our relationship settled into something manageable. Polite texts, holiday appearances, surface-level conversations. Distance softened things, or so I thought. When she invited me to dinner, she framed it as a reset. Just us, she said. No pressure. She even used a heart emoji, which should have been my first red flag. I arrived 10 minutes early, wine in hand, nerves buzzing. Her house smelled like roasted chicken and lemon cleaner. Everything looked perfect, staged. She hugged me a second too tightly. You look tired, she said immediately. Are you eating enough? There it was, right on schedule. Dinner started fine. Small talk, work updates. My dad asked about my apartment. Karen nodded along, smiling, but her eyes never left me. She was waiting. Halfway through the meal, she put her fork down. So, she said, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. My dad shifted in his chair. I felt my shoulders tense. She leaned forward. I don't think you're very happy. I blinked. I'm okay. She shook her head slowly. I don't think so. You seem lost, unsettled, and honestly, Amelia, I think a lot of that comes from the choices you've made. The room felt smaller. What choices? I asked. Well, she said, gesturing vaguely, moving out so suddenly. Keeping your distance. Not being as involved with the family anymore. My dad cleared his throat. Karen knows, she said quickly. This is important. I felt heat rise in my face. I didn't move out suddenly. I planned it for months. She smiled, thin and tight. From our perspective, it felt abrupt. That sentence hit harder than it should have. Our perspective, like mine, didn't count. She continued. Your father and I worry that you're being selfish. There it was. The word I'd grown up hearing whenever I chose myself. I pay my bills, I said carefully. I work full-time. I visit. I call. But not enough, she said gently. Not like family should. I looked at my dad. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Karen sighed, like this conversation exhausted her. We've helped you so much over the years. And lately, it feels like you've forgotten that. That's when I realized this wasn't a dinner. It was an intervention, or maybe a trial. I didn't know there were conditions, I said quietly. She frowned. That's not fair, isn't it? I asked. My heart was pounding now. You invited me here to tell me I'm failing at being a daughter. She shook her head. A stepdaughter, she corrected softly. That word landed like a slap. The rest of the meal blurred. I barely tasted the food. My dad stayed silent. Karen talked about family values and gratitude and responsibility. I nodded because that's what I'd been trained to do. But something had shifted. When dessert came out, I stood up. I think I should go, I said. Karen looked surprised. Already. I grabbed my coat. You invited me to dinner. You turned it into a confrontation. I won't sit through that. My dad finally spoke. Amelia, don't overreact. I looked at him, really looked. I left with my wine unopened and my chest tight. In my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel. I understood something I hadn't before. That dinner wasn't about concern. It was about control. And I wasn't willing to give it to her anymore. I sat in my car for a long time after leaving their house. Engine off, hands still gripping the steering wheel, like I needed something solid to keep me grounded. My phone buzzed once. Then again, I didn't look. I already knew who it was. When I finally drove home, the streets felt unfamiliar, like I was seeing my city from a distance. I replayed the dinner in my head, every sentence looping back to the same realization. That conversation had been planned. Carefully, calmly. She hadn't invited me to reconnect. She'd invited me to correct myself. By the time I got home, I had 3 missed calls. 2 from my dad, 1 from Karen. I didn't answer any of them. The next morning, my dad texted first. "You didn't have to leave like that." I stared at the screen, waiting for the rest. An apology. An acknowledgement. Something. Nothing came. I typed back, "I didn't come to be judged." His reply took longer this time. Karen was just trying to help. That sentence felt familiar in the worst way. It was the same shield he'd always used. The way he avoided choosing sides by pretending there weren't any. I didn't respond. Later that afternoon, Karen sent a message of her own. "I'm sorry if you felt attacked. That wasn't my intention. But difficult conversations are part of being a family. If you felt attacked," I read it 3 times, trying to find the apology hidden inside. There wasn't one. "Just responsibility gently handed back to me." I finally replied. "You didn't ask how I felt. You told me what was wrong with me." Her response was immediate. "We wouldn't say these things if we didn't care." That was when I understood something important. In her mind, caring and control were the same thing. The following week was quiet. Too quiet, no calls, no check-ins. I went to work, came home, tried to focus on my routine, but everything felt slightly off, like I was waiting for something to drop. Then my younger cousin messaged me, "Are you okay? Karen said you stormed out of dinner and really hurt your dad." My chest tightened. That's how it always happened. The story traveled before I did, reshaped into something easier for them to live with. I hadn't left calmly. I'd stormed. I hadn't set a boundary. I'd hurt them. I replied, "I'm okay. There's more to it than that." She didn't respond. A few days later, my dad called again. I answered this time. "Why are you telling people we attacked you?" he asked. No greeting, straight to the point. I didn't. I said, "I told one person I was okay." "Well, Karen's upset," he said. "She feels like you're making her out to be the bad guy." I took a slow breath. "Dad, she invited me to dinner and criticized my life for an hour." She was concerned. He insisted. "No," I said quietly. She was disappointed that I don't live the way she wants. Silence. "You embarrassed her." He finally said, That hurt more than the dinner itself." I was embarrassed too. I said, "But I didn't humiliate anyone." He sighed. "You're being sensitive." There it was. The word that had followed me my entire life. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I'm just done pretending this is normal. After that call, I stopped explaining myself. Every attempt felt like shouting into a room where no one wanted to listen. I realized something else too. Karen didn't want resolution. She wanted compliance. And my dad wanted peace even if it meant sacrificing me to keep it. A week later, Karen texted again. "We're having family dinner Sunday. It would mean a lot if you came. No drama." I laughed out loud when I read it. No drama. As if drama was something I brought with me. Like a coat I could choose to leave at home. I didn't reply. That Sunday, I cooked dinner for myself. Pasta, a glass of wine, music playing softly in my apartment. It was peaceful in a way I hadn't expected. Lonely, maybe, but honest. That night, my dad sent one final message. "I wish you'd try harder." I looked at my phone, then set it face down. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to defend myself. Because deep down, I knew the truth. I had been trying my whole life. And that dinner wasn't about fixing anything. It was about reminding me of my place. And I was finally ready to choose a different one. After that Sunday passed, something settled into place. Not relief, not closure, just clarity. I stopped waiting for the phone to ring. I stopped rereading old messages, trying to figure out where I could have said things differently. The silence wasn't peaceful yet, but it was honest. And that mattered more. I didn't hear from Karen at all the following week. No texts, no checking in. That absence felt deliberate, like she was waiting for me to break first. In the past, I would have reached out just to smooth things over, even if it meant swallowing my discomfort. This time, I didn't. Instead, my dad called on Thursday evening. "Your stepmom feels like you're shutting her out," he said. I leaned back on my couch, staring at the ceiling. "I'm taking space." "That hurts her," he replied. I closed my eyes. "What about how the dinner hurt me?" He paused. "She didn't intend it that way." I exhaled slowly. Intent doesn't cancel impact. That was new for me, using language I'd only recently learned. Words that gave shape to feelings I'd never been allowed to name. There was another pause, heavier this time. "You've changed," he said. "Yes," I replied. "I have." After we hung up, I sat with that sentence for a long time. "You've changed." It wasn't an insult anymore. It felt like a milestone. A few days later, my aunt reached out. She asked if everything was okay between me and Karen. Apparently, concern had turned into conversation, and conversation into speculation. I kept my response simple. I'm setting boundaries, she replied with a heart emoji, and families are complicated. That phrase used to make me feel small, like complexity was an excuse for harm. Now it just sounded like an observation, not a verdict. The real shift came when I started recognizing how deeply I'd been conditioned to doubt myself. Every time I said no to a call, to a dinner, to a conversation, I felt a flicker of guilt, quickly followed by something steadier, relief. Each boundary made the next one easier. Then Karen broke her silence. She emailed me a long one, paragraphs of carefully chosen words. She wrote about how hard it was to be a stepmother, how much she'd sacrificed, how she'd always tried to include me, even when I made it difficult. She said she felt disrespected, undermined, misunderstood. She never mentioned the dinner. At the end, she wrote, I hope someday you can see that everything I do comes from love. I read it twice. Then I closed my laptop. I didn't respond right away. I let myself sit with the discomfort of not fixing it, of not clarifying, of not apologizing for things I hadn't done. When I finally replied, it was short. I understand you have your perspective. I have mine. I need space right now. Her response came quickly. Space only creates distance. I typed, deleted, typed again. Then I sent the truth. Distance is sometimes necessary to be healthy. She didn't reply after that. Weeks passed. My life grew fuller in small, quiet ways. I met friends for coffee. I took longer walks. I noticed how much energy I had when I wasn't bracing for judgment. I started trusting my instincts again, something I hadn't done in years. But the past has a way of resurfacing when you least expect it. One afternoon, my dad showed up at my apartment unannounced. I hadn't given him a key, but he knew the building. I opened the door, surprised. Can we talk? He asked. I stepped aside. He looked around my place like he was trying to understand me through my furniture. Your stepmom's really hurt, he said. I nodded. I know. She thinks you hate her. I met his eyes. I don't hate her. I just don't accept being spoken to that way. He sighed. She was trying to guide you. I didn't ask for guidance. I said, I asked for respect. That seemed to land differently. He sat down slowly. I didn't realize how much pressure you felt, he admitted. That was the closest thing to validation I'd gotten so far. I need you to hear this, I said gently. If being part of this family means enduring confrontations disguised as concern, I can't do that anymore. He nodded once. I don't want to lose you. You won't, I said, but things can't go back to how they were. He left a while later, quieter than when he arrived. After the door closed, I felt something I hadn't expected. Pride. Not loud or triumphant, just steady. I was finally choosing myself not in anger, not in rebellion, but in truth. And I knew the hardest part was still coming. Because setting boundaries is one thing. Holding them is another. Holding boundaries turned out to be harder than setting them. Saying the words was one thing. Living with the consequences was something else entirely. Once my dad left my apartment that afternoon, I knew the calm wouldn't last, and never did. Silence in my family was always temporary, just a pause before the next attempt to pull me back in. It came sooner than I expected. Karen invited me to lunch the following week, just her and me. No dad, no audience. The message was polite, almost fragile. She said she wanted to clear the air. Part of me considered declining outright, but another part wanted to see her face to face without a dinner table or a carefully staged confrontation between us. I agreed with conditions. Public place, limited time. We met at a cafe downtown. She arrived early, already seated, hands wrapped around a coffee she wasn't drinking. For a moment, she looked nervous. Human. I almost felt bad. Almost. She started by telling me how much she'd struggled since our dinner, how hurt she'd been, how confused. I listened without interrupting, reminding myself that listening didn't mean agreeing. Then she shifted. I just don't understand why you took everything so personally, she said. Families talk honestly. Honesty without kindness is just criticism, I replied. She blinked, clearly not expecting that. I was trying to help you see patterns, she said. You tend to pull away. You isolate. I took a breath. I pull away when I don't feel safe. Her jaw tightened. I've always welcomed you. I looked at her, really looked. You welcomed me when I behaved the way you wanted. Her eyes hardened. That's not fair. Maybe not, I said, but it's my experience. She crossed her arms. Your father is caught in the middle because of this. That familiar weight pressed down on me again. He doesn't need to be, I said. I'm not asking him to choose. I'm asking him to respect my boundaries. Karen shook her head. Boundaries feel like walls. They're not walls, I said. They're doors, and I get to decide when they're open. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she sighed. I feel like I'm losing control of this family. There was the truth, slipping out unguarded. I was never something to control, I said quietly. We sat in silence after that. The cafe noise filled the space between us. When she finally spoke again, her voice was softer, but no less firm. I don't think you understand how much I've done for this family. I nodded. I do. But doing a lot doesn't give anyone the right to hurt someone else. She didn't respond. We parted politely, but without warmth. I walked away feeling strangely light, like I'd finally stopped arguing with reality. Karen wasn't going to change, at least not in the ways I needed. Later that evening, my dad called. She feels like you shut her down, he said. I spoke honestly, I replied. She's trying. He insisted. So am I said. He was quiet for a long time. Then, what do you want, Amelia? I thought about it carefully. I want a relationship that doesn't require me to shrink. He exhaled slowly. That might take time. I know, I said, I'm willing to wait, but I won't compromise myself in the meantime. After that, the pressure eased. Not disappeared, but eased. Fewer calls, fewer emotional landmines. Karen stopped reaching out directly. My dad checked in occasionally, cautiously, like he was learning a new language. And me. I started trusting myself more. I stopped second-guessing my reactions. I learned that discomfort doesn't always mean you're wrong sometimes. It means you're growing. There were still moments of doubt, family gatherings I skipped, holidays that felt quieter than before, but the quiet no longer felt empty. It felt intentional. I was no longer reacting. I was choosing, and that choice, steady, deliberate, was changing everything. I just didn't know yet how it would all finally settle. By the time winter arrived, the distance between me and my stepmom had settled into something stable, not warm, not hostile, just clear. For the first time in years, I wasn't living in a constant state of anticipation, waiting for the next comment or correction. The absence of tension felt unfamiliar at first. Like walking without a weight I'd carried so long, I forgot it was there. The real test came during the holidays. My dad called in early December and asked if I'd come for Christmas dinner. His voice was careful, like he was stepping across thin ice. Karen will be there, he added. I assumed she would be, I said. She promised to keep things light. I smiled at that. I'll come, but if it turns into another confrontation, I'll leave. He agreed quickly. Too quickly. Still, it mattered that he agreed at all. Christmas dinner felt different from the moment I walked in. The house was the same, but the energy wasn't. Karen hugged me, brief and polite, no comments about my appearance, no subtle digs. We talked about neutral things, movies, work, the weather. It wasn't warm, but it was respectful. Halfway through the meal, Karen looked at me and said, I'm glad you came. There was no edge in her voice. Just fact. Me too, I replied. That moment didn't erase the past, but it acknowledged the present, and that was enough. Later that evening, as we washed dishes together in silence, she spoke again. I didn't realize how strongly you felt, she said. Not an apology, but closer than I expected.
I tried
to say it before I replied. I just didn't know how. She nodded once. I'm still learning. So was I on the drive home. I realized something important. Resolution doesn't always look like closure. Sometimes it looks like boundaries being respected, even imperfectly. Sometimes it's not about winning or being validated. It's about being able to exist without fear. In the months that followed, my relationship with my dad improved. We talked more openly. He asked before offering opinions. He listened, really listened when I spoke. Karen remained more distant, but civil, and that was okay. Not every relationship has to be close to be healthy. I stopped trying to earn my place in the family. I stopped measuring my worth by how easy I was to deal with. I learned that love doesn't require silence and respect doesn't demand obedience. Looking back, I understand now that the dinner wasn't the problem, it was the pattern. That night simply forced it into the light. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that being called difficult often just means you're no longer convenient. And choosing yourself doesn't mean you love your family. It means you love yourself enough to stop disappearing. I still see my family. I still care, but I no longer shrink to fit into spaces that weren't built for me. And that confrontation, it didn't break us, it changed us. And for the first time, that change feels like something I can live with